October 12, 1987. Riverside, California. Emergency room physician Dr. Patricia Hernandez stares at the 8-month-old infant on the examination table. The baby girl, Emma Caldwell, has been brought in by her 19-year-old babysitter, Rachel Mosley, who claims the family's pet ferret attacked the child unprovoked. But something doesn't add up. The bite marks on the babysitter's hands are defensive wounds, deep, vicious, the kind an animal makes when protecting something. The baby's injuries tell a different story entirely. Cigarette burns on her feet, healing fractures in her ribs, bruises in various stages of healing across her tiny body. Dr. Hernandez picks up the phone to call the police. In the examination room, Rachel Mosley's story begins to fall apart. Within 48 hours, investigators would uncover a network of abuse spanning 3 households, involving 7 children and lasting nearly 2 years. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Channel introduction, 30 seconds. Before we uncover the truth about how a pet ferret became an unlikely hero and exposed one of California's most disturbing child abuse cases, make sure to subscribe to Fear Sermon and ring that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's darkest corners. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers around the world. Now, let's descend into this nightmare. Riverside, California, 1985. The city sprawls along the Santa Ana River, caught between its agricultural past and suburban future. Ronald Reagan sits in the White House. MTV dominates youth culture. The nation's economy rebounds from recession, and the American dream feels within reach for middle-class families buying homes in developments with names like Meadowbrook and Sunnyvale Estates. The Caldwell family epitomizes this prosperity. Michael Caldwell, 32, works as a regional sales manager for a computer components manufacturer. His wife, Jennifer, 29, left her nursing career to raise their daughter, Emma. Born in February 1987, they purchased a 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Drive in the spring of 1985, joining a neighborhood of young families, manicured lawns, and backyard barbecues. This is the era before mandatory reporting training becomes ubiquitous, before background checks for childcare workers, before the national conversation about abuse prevention that would emerge in the 1990s. Neighbors mind their own business. Privacy is sacred. What happens behind closed doors stays there. The Caldwells seem unremarkable in every way. Michael coaches Little League on weekends. Jennifer volunteers with the church auxiliary. They host neighborhood watch meetings in their living room. They are, by all appearances, model citizens in a model community. But in late 1986, small cracks begin to appear in this perfect facade. Jennifer Caldwell begins suffering from severe postpartum depression following Emma's birth. She withdraws from social activities. Friends notice she seems exhausted, overwhelmed, sometimes barely responsive when they encounter her at the grocery store. Michael throws himself deeper into work, traveling more frequently, leaving Jennifer alone with the baby for days at a time. In July 1987, they hire Rachel Mosley. Rachel, 19, lives 3 blocks away with her mother and stepfather. She dropped out of Riverside Community College after 1 semester, working various retail jobs, searching for direction. The Caldwells pay her $8 an hour to watch Emma 4 days a week, while Jennifer attends therapy sessions and support groups recommended by her doctor. The arrangement seems to work. Emma appears content. Jennifer begins improving. Michael's business trips grow more frequent, sometimes lasting a full week. Rachel becomes almost a fixture in the household, arriving Monday mornings and often staying through dinner. What the Caldwells don't know is that Rachel has a boyfriend. Tyler Grant, 23, has a criminal record the Caldwells never thought to check. Petty theft, assault charges that were later dropped, a restraining order from a previous girlfriend that expired 6 months earlier. He's manipulative, controlling, and has convinced Rachel that she's worthless without him, and he's begun visiting the Caldwell house when she babysits. In August 1987, the Caldwells purchased 2 ferrets from a local pet store. Michael read an article about how ferrets make good pets for families with young children, smaller than cats, playful, trainable. They named them Bandit and Mischief. The animals roam freely through the house, curious and intelligent. What no one realizes is that these ferrets are about to become witnesses to horror. The first incident occurs on August 19, 1987. Jennifer Caldwell returns home from her support group to find Emma screaming inconsolably. Rachel explains the baby fell while trying to stand in her crib, bumping her head on the railing. There's a small bruise forming on Emma's temple. Rachel seems appropriately concerned, suggesting they should call the pediatrician. Jennifer accepts this explanation. Babies fall. It happens. She makes a note to lower the crib mattress another level. 3 days later, Michael notices that Mischief, one of the ferrets, has become aggressively protective of Emma. When Rachel reaches into the crib during Michael's brief time home between business trips, the animal hisses and positions itself between the babysitter and the baby. Michael finds it odd, but amusing. He mentions it to Jennifer, who hasn't noticed the behavior. On September 3, 1987, a neighbor named Patricia Thornton makes a disturbing observation. She's trimming roses in her front yard when she notices Tyler Grant's distinctive motorcycle parked 2 houses down. She's seen it before, always on days when the Caldwell's car is gone and Rachel is babysitting. Patricia knows Tyler's reputation. Everyone in the neighborhood does. His family lived on the next block before his parents divorced, before the incidents that got him expelled from high school. Patricia considers calling the Caldwells. She drafts the conversation in her mind a dozen times. But what would she say? That the babysitter has her boyfriend over? Is that really so terrible? She doesn't want to seem like a busybody. She doesn't want to cause trouble for Rachel, who seems like a sweet girl trying to earn money. Patricia Thornton will testify 18 months later that this decision haunts her every single day. The second documented incident occurs on September 14, 1987. Emma is scheduled for a routine 6-month checkup. Dr. William Morrison, the pediatrician, notes some bruising on the infant's upper arms, small circular marks, 4 on the left arm, 3 on the right. When he asks Jennifer about them, she seems genuinely surprised. She hadn't noticed. Rachel had been doing most of the bathing lately since Jennifer was feeling overwhelmed. Dr. Morrison documents the bruises in Emma's file. They could be from gripping, he notes. Sometimes caregivers hold babies too firmly without realizing their own strength. He recommends Jennifer demonstrate proper holding techniques to Rachel. He does not call Child Protective Services. This is 1987. The medical community's understanding of abuse indicators is evolving but not yet standardized. Dr. Morrison makes a judgment call. He sees a mother struggling with depression, a family trying their best. He decides to monitor rather than report. 3 weeks later, the pattern escalates. Michael Caldwell returns early from a business trip on October 2nd. It's Friday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. He wasn't supposed to be home until Sunday evening. His meetings concluded earlier than expected, and he caught a standby flight, eager to surprise his family. He walks into his house to find Tyler Grant in his living room. The young man is sitting on the couch watching television, drinking one of Michael's beers. Rachel is in the kitchen making sandwiches. Emma is in her playpen, silent, staring at nothing with an expression Michael will later describe as absent. Both Rachel and Tyler startle when Michael enters. They fumble explanations. Tyler is just visiting. He stopped by to see if Rachel wanted to grab lunch after work. He's been here 10 minutes, 15 tops. Michael doesn't believe them. But he's conflict-averse, trained by corporate culture to avoid confrontation. He asks Tyler to leave. He tells Rachel they need to discuss boundaries. She cries, apologizes profusely, promises it will never happen again. She needs this job. Her stepfather is threatening to kick her out. Please don't fire her. Please. Michael relents. He tells Jennifer about the incident that evening, but downplays it. Rachel made a mistake. She's young. They all make mistakes at that age. Jennifer, medicated and exhausted, accepts this. Neither of them notices that Emma has become unusually quiet. The third incident happens exactly 1 week later. Jennifer takes Emma to a mother-baby yoga class, something her therapist recommended. In the changing room, another mother notices bruising on Emma's legs. Fresh bruises, dark purple marks that couldn't be more than a day or two old. "What happened?" the woman asks, her tone carefully neutral. Jennifer looks at her daughter's legs and feels ice flood her veins. She hadn't seen these. How had she not seen these? She stammers something about baby gates, about Emma pulling herself up on furniture, about how active she's becoming. The other mother nods, but her expression suggests she doesn't quite believe this explanation. Jennifer drives home in silence, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She's a nurse. She knows what suspicious bruising looks like. But Emma is her daughter. Rachel is her babysitter. This is her home, her safe space, her carefully constructed life. She tells herself she's being paranoid. The depression is making her think terrible thoughts. She doesn't call the police. Not yet. October 11th, 1987. The final incident before everything unravels. Rachel is babysitting. It's Sunday afternoon. Michael is in Phoenix. Jennifer is at a mandatory therapy session. Rachel expects to be alone with Emma until evening. What she doesn't know is that Jennifer's therapist had to cancel last minute due to a family emergency. Jennifer has been driving around, trying to work up the courage to go home, to confront Rachel, to demand answers about the bruises. At 3:15 p.m., Jennifer pulls into her driveway. She hears the baby screaming before she even opens the car door. Jennifer runs into the house. The scene she discovers will be seared into her memory forever. Emma is in her crib screaming. Tyler Grant is in the nursery, standing over the crib, his face flushed with rage. Rachel is trying to pull him away, pleading with him to stop, to calm down, to leave the baby alone. And Bandit, the larger of the two ferrets, is latched onto Tyler's ankle, teeth sunk deep into his flesh. Tyler kicks at the animal, sends it flying across the room. He turns toward Jennifer and she sees something feral in his eyes, something dangerous. Rachel is crying, hyperventilating, backing toward the door. Jennifer doesn't think. She scoops Emma from the crib and runs. She's in her car, doors locked, engine running, before her conscious mind catches up with her body. Emma is still screaming. There's a burn mark on her foot, fresh, circular, the size of a cigarette tip. Jennifer drives directly to the emergency room. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button to support our deep dives into history's most disturbing cases. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries and true crime. Let's discover what happens next in this nightmare that's only beginning to unfold. Dr. Patricia Hernandez has worked in emergency medicine for 11 years. She's treated gunshot wounds, car accidents, overdoses. She considers herself unshakable. But when she examines Emma Caldwell on October 11, 1987, her hands begin to tremble. The burn on the infant's foot is fresh, less than 30 minutes old. But it's not the only one. There are healing burns on the other foot. 3 of them. Circular, identical in size. Someone has been extinguishing cigarettes on this baby's feet repeatedly, systematically. Dr. Hernandez performs a complete physical examination. What she documents sends cold horror through every nurse and physician in the emergency department. 23 distinct bruises in various stages of healing. Finger-shaped bruises on both upper arms, bruises on the inner thighs, a healing fracture in the left 7th rib, visible on X-ray, another healing fracture in the right forearm, older burn marks on the buttocks, barely visible, weeks old. The physical evidence tells a story of prolonged, systematic abuse. Jennifer Caldwell sits in the consultation room, her entire world crumbling. Dr. Hernandez speaks gently but directly. These injuries could not have been accidental. Someone has been hurting Emma deliberately, multiple times, over weeks, possibly months. But I would have seen, Jennifer whispers. I'm a nurse. I would have known. Dr. Hernandez has heard this before. Abusers are careful. They injure children in places clothing covers. They time their abuse for moments when parents are absent or distracted. They manipulate, gaslight, make excuses. At 4:23 p.m., Dr. Hernandez calls the Riverside Police Department and Child Protective Services. Detective Sarah Chen arrives at the hospital at 5:10 p.m. She's a 7-year veteran of the department's Special Victims Unit, trained specifically for child abuse cases. She photographs Emma's injuries with clinical precision. Each bruise, each burn, each fracture visible on X-ray. Then she interviews Jennifer Caldwell. Jennifer tells her everything. Rachel, Tyler, the motorcycle she'd seen parked near the house, the unexplained bruises, her own doubts that she'd rationalized away, the incident that afternoon with Tyler in the nursery and the ferret attacking him. Detective Chen's expression remains neutral, but her mind is racing. If Tyler Grant was involved, and if Rachel knew, this case might be larger than a single babysitter abusing one child. At 6:47 p.m., Detective Chen and 2 uniformed officers arrive at Rachel Mosley's home. Rachel answers the door with fresh scratches on her arms. Tyler Grant sits on the couch in the living room, a bandage wrapped around his ankle where the ferret bit him. Both immediately lawyer up, refusing to answer questions. But in Rachel's bedroom, detectives find a journal. The entries span from July 1987 to October 1987. Rachel writes about Tyler, about how he loses his temper when the baby cries, about how he says he's just trying to teach her to be quiet, to behave, about how Rachel knows it's wrong but can't make him stop, about how she's trapped, terrified, complicit. The journal entries reveal another horrifying detail. Tyler has been bringing Emma to another location, a house on the east side of Riverside where his cousin lives. There are other children there. Tyler has been using Emma and these other children for an amateur pornography operation, trading photographs through an underground network that predates the internet. Detective Chen feels her stomach turn. This isn't just abuse. This is organized exploitation. Within 6 hours, investigators execute search warrants at 3 additional locations. Tyler Grant's cousin, Marcus Webb, 31, lives in a dilapidated rental house on Canyon Crest Drive. When officers breach the door at 1:22 a.m. on October 12th, they find 2 children locked in a bedroom, a 4-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, both malnourished, both showing signs of prolonged abuse. The house contains a makeshift photography studio, lighting equipment, a Polaroid camera, boxes of photographs depicting child sexual abuse, names and addresses written on envelopes, suggesting a distribution network spanning 3 states. Marcus Webb is arrested on scene. The investigation expands rapidly. By dawn on October 12th, 7 more individuals are in custody. By October 15th, authorities have identified 9 child victims and a network of 14 perpetrators involved in a child exploitation ring that had been operating in Riverside County for almost 2 years. Emma Caldwell becomes known as Baby E in court documents. The ferret that bit Tyler Grant, Bandit, is mentioned in every news report. The media seizes on this detail, the heroic pet that saved a child's life. But the children who lived through this nightmare know the truth is far more complex than any headline could capture. The prosecution faces unprecedented challenges. This is 1987. DNA evidence is in its infancy. Digital forensics doesn't exist. The case rests on physical evidence, photographs, witness testimony, and the journal entries Rachel Mosley kept, documenting her complicity and fear. District Attorney Margaret Thornhill, 43, takes personal charge of the prosecution. She's built her career on child welfare cases, but nothing has prepared her for this scope. 9 children between the ages of 8 months and 7 years, 14 defendants. A web of abuse and exploitation so complex that building a prosecutable case requires 6 months of intensive investigation. The preliminary hearings begin in April 1988. Rachel Mosley agrees to testify against Tyler Grant and Marcus Webb in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her attorney argues she was a victim herself, coerced and manipulated by an older, abusive boyfriend. The prosecution argues she had multiple opportunities to report the abuse and chose not to, making her an active participant. Rachel's testimony is devastating. She describes in clinical detail how Tyler began pressuring her in August 1987, how he convinced her to let him visit while she was babysitting, how he started photographing Emma during diaper changes, claiming it was harmless, how it escalated to abuse, how he threatened to hurt Rachel, to tell the Caldwells she was stealing from them, to ruin her life if she didn't cooperate. She testifies about the house on Canyon Crest Drive, about meeting other children there, about watching Tyler and Marcus photograph these children in various states of undress and abuse, about the network of men who would visit, who would pay for access to the children, who would leave with photographs and return weeks later wanting more. Rachel breaks down on the witness stand multiple times. The jury watches, trying to reconcile this sobbing teenager with the monster the prosecution describes. Defense attorneys attack her credibility mercilessly. They point out inconsistencies in her journal entries. They suggest she's fabricating details to reduce her own sentence. They argue she's the primary abuser, not Tyler. But the physical evidence corroborates her testimony. The photographs found at Marcus Webb's house include images of Emma Caldwell. The burns on the children's bodies match patterns of abuse Rachel described. Medical experts testify about the timing of injuries, creating a timeline that aligns with Rachel's babysitting schedule and Tyler's visits. Tyler Grant takes the stand in his own defense, a decision his attorneys will later admit was catastrophic. He's arrogant, dismissive, occasionally smirking when he thinks the jury isn't watching. He claims Rachel is lying to save herself. He admits to visiting the Caldwell house but denies touching Emma. He cannot adequately explain why his fingerprints are on photographs depicting child abuse. He cannot explain the ferret bite on his ankle. Under cross-examination, he begins to unravel. DA Thornhill asks him about specific photographs, about specific dates, about testimony from other defendants who have already pleaded guilty, and described Tyler as the ringleader of the operation. Tyler's responses become defensive, then hostile, then incoherent. The jury deliberates for 11 hours. On September 14, 1988, Tyler Grant is convicted on 37 counts including child abuse, child pornography production and distribution, and conspiracy. He is sentenced to 45 years in state prison without possibility of parole for 30 years. Marcus Webb receives a 40-year sentence. 6 other defendants receive sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. 3 receive probation and mandatory sex offender registration after pleading guilty to lesser charges and cooperating with investigators. Rachel Mosley pleads guilty to child endangerment and conspiracy to commit child abuse. In December 1988, she is sentenced to 12 years in prison. She will serve 8 years before parole. Sentencing of Rachel Mosley generates intense public debate. Victim advocacy groups argue she was manipulated and abused herself, that she deserves treatment, not incarceration. Child protection advocates argue she had agency, that she made choices that resulted in horrific harm to children, that sympathy for her situation cannot excuse her actions. Judge Robert Patterson, who presided over the case, addresses this directly in his sentencing remarks. Miss Mosley was both victim and victimizer. She suffered at the hands of Tyler Grant, but in her suffering she allowed innocent children to suffer far worse. The law must hold her accountable while acknowledging the complexity of her situation. The impact on the victims extends far beyond the courtroom. Emma Caldwell spends 3 weeks in foster care while Child Protective Services evaluates her parents. Jennifer Caldwell undergoes intensive psychological evaluation. Investigators must determine whether she genuinely didn't notice the abuse or whether she willfully ignored signs to maintain her comfortable life. The conclusion is heartbreaking. Jennifer was so consumed by postpartum depression, so medicated, so desperate to hold her life together, that she rationalized away evidence that should have been obvious to a trained nurse. She was negligent, but not criminally so. Emma is returned to her parents' custody with mandatory supervision and therapy requirements. Michael Caldwell quits his traveling sales position. He takes a local job with a significant pay cut to remain home. The family moves to a different city, seeking anonymity. They change their last name. They refuse all media interviews, but the damage cannot be undone. Emma Caldwell, known publicly only as Baby E, will grow up with no memory of the abuse but a childhood defined by its aftermath. Therapy, hypervigilant parents, the knowledge that something terrible happened to her, even if she can't remember it. The media attention that resurfaces every few years when one of her abusers comes up for parole. The other children face even longer roads to recovery. 2 are adopted by relatives. 4 go into foster care and bounce through multiple placements. 1, the 6-year-old girl found in Marcus Webb's house, will speak publicly 20 years later about her experience. She describes the betrayal, the confusion, the years of therapy required to process trauma her young mind couldn't comprehend. People think children are resilient, she tells a documentary filmmaker in 2007, but we don't bounce back, we just learn to build our lives around the broken parts. Patricia Thornton, the neighbor who noticed Tyler's motorcycle but said nothing, undergoes her own reckoning. She testifies at trial about what she observed. Afterward, she becomes an advocate for mandated reporting laws, lobbying the California legislature to expand requirements for reporting suspected child abuse. Dr. William Morrison, the pediatrician who saw bruises but didn't report them, faces disciplinary action from the California Medical Board. He receives a formal reprimand and is required to complete training on abuse recognition and reporting. He tells investigators he thinks about Emma Caldwell every single day, wondering if earlier intervention could have prevented months of suffering. The investigation also reveals systemic failures that allowed this network to operate. Background checks for childcare workers in California in 1987 were not mandatory. Rachel Mosley was hired based solely on the Caldwell's impression of her and recommendations from neighbors. Tyler Grant had a criminal record, but no system existed to flag his presence around children. The underground pornography network exploited technological and legal gaps. Pre-internet, trading illegal photographs through mail required manual investigation that overwhelmed law enforcement resources. The Riverside case leads to a federal task force that identifies and dismantles 17 similar operations across the western United States between 1988 and 1992. And then there's Bandit. The ferret that attacked Tyler Grant becomes an unlikely symbol of the case. Animal behavior experts testify at trial that ferrets can become protective of human infants in their household. that Bandit likely recognized Emma was in distress and acted on instinct. The media runs countless stories about the heroic pet that saved a baby's life. Bandit and Mischief go to live with Jennifer Caldwell's sister after the family relocates. They live out their natural lifespans, 5 and 6 years respectively, in a home where they're treated as treasured family members. When Bandit dies in 1992, the family holds a small memorial service. But the real legacy of this case extends far beyond one protective animal. The Riverside child abuse case becomes a catalyst for sweeping reforms in California's child protection system. In 1989, California passes the Child Abuse Prevention and Reporting Act expansion, mandating background checks for all child care workers and requiring pediatricians to receive annual training on abuse recognition and reporting protocols. The law directly references the Emma Caldwell case in its legislative findings. By 1991, 43 states adopt similar legislation. The professional standards for recognizing child abuse undergo complete revision. Medical schools implement new curriculum requirements. Pediatric residency programs include mandatory rotations with child protection teams. The case also exposes the growing threat of organized child exploitation networks. Federal authorities launch Operation Safe Childhood in 1989, a multi-year initiative to identify and dismantle child pornography rings operating through mail distribution. The operation leads to 723 arrests nationwide between 1989 and 1995. Investigators credit the Riverside case with revealing the scope and organization of these networks, which previously had been investigated as isolated incidents rather than coordinated criminal enterprises. Technology plays an unexpected role in changing enforcement priorities. The Riverside investigation's emphasis on photographic evidence establishes new protocols for preserving and cataloging child exploitation materials. These protocols become foundational when digital evidence emerges in the 1990s. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, established in 1984, expands its mission to include a database of child exploitation images, directly modeled on systems developed during the Riverside prosecution. But perhaps the most significant impact is cultural. The Emma Caldwell case occurs during a broader societal awakening about child abuse. The 1980s see an explosion of awareness about child sexual abuse, stranger danger, and the vulnerability of children in various care situations. Sometimes this awareness tips into panic. The decade also includes the McMartin preschool trial and similar cases where abuse allegations, while taken seriously, are later questioned or disproven. The Riverside case stands apart because the evidence is undeniable. The photographs exist. The medical evidence is clear. The perpetrators are convicted. There is no ambiguity, no later exoneration, no doubt about what happened. This clarity makes the case a touchstone in training materials and legal education. Law schools use it as a case study in prosecuting complex child abuse networks. Medical schools use it to teach abuse recognition. Social work programs use it to discuss mandated reporting and the consequences of inaction. The case also raises uncomfortable questions about complicity and coercion. Rachel Mosley's conviction and testimony generate a national debate about whether young women in abusive relationships should be held criminally responsible for abuse they enable, but do not directly commit. Victim advocacy groups argue the legal system fails to account for the psychological dynamics of domestic abuse. Prosecutors argue that sympathy for perpetrators cannot supersede justice for victims. This debate continues into the present day, with no clear resolution. Courts struggle to balance accountability with recognition of how trauma and coercion affect decision-making. Rachel Mosley's case becomes a reference point in this ongoing conversation, cited by both sides to support contradictory positions. The children at the center of the case largely disappear from public view. Emma Caldwell's family successfully shields her identity. She grows up in anonymity, attends college, builds a life. According to a 2015 statement released through an attorney, she has no desire to speak publicly about her experience and requests media respect her privacy. Other victims have been less fortunate. The psychological trauma of early childhood abuse creates lifelong challenges. Some struggle with addiction, relationships, trust. Others find healing through therapy, advocacy work, and building connections with other survivors. In 2007, 3 survivors of the Riverside case participate in a documentary examining child exploitation networks of the 1980s. They speak about the long-term impacts, the difficulty of processing trauma they can barely remember, the feeling of being defined by the worst thing that ever happened to them. People want a happy ending, one survivor says. They want to hear that we're all fine now, that justice was served and we moved on. But it doesn't work like that. We're still living with this every day. The case also reveals the limitations of the justice system. 9 children were identified as victims, 14 people were prosecuted. But investigators believe the network was larger. Some participants were never identified. Some victims were never found. The full scope of the operation remains unknown. Tyler Grant, the ringleader, comes up for parole consideration in 2018. His request is denied after testimony from victims and victim advocates. He will be eligible for parole again in 2028. Each hearing resurrects the case in media coverage, forcing survivors to relive their trauma in public view. Marcus Webb died in prison in 2003, attacked by another inmate after his crimes became known within the facility. His death receives minimal media attention, a footnote in a larger tragedy. Rachel Mosley completes her sentence and is released on parole in 1996. She changes her name, relocates to another state, and maintains a low profile. According to public records, she completed her parole requirements successfully and has not been charged with any subsequent crimes. She has never given a media interview or public statement beyond her testimony at trial. The question that haunts everyone who studies this case is simple and unanswerable. How many chances did people have to intervene earlier? Patricia Thornton saw Tyler's motorcycle and said nothing. Dr. Morrison saw bruises and didn't report. Jennifer Caldwell noticed changes in her daughter and rationalized them away. Each moment of hesitation, each decision to give the benefit of the doubt, each choice to avoid confrontation, extended the children's suffering. This is the true horror at the heart of the case. Not the actions of obvious monsters like Tyler Grant, but the inaction of ordinary people who saw signs and chose not to see them. The Riverside case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about child protection. We want to believe abuse is obvious, that we would recognize it, that we would act without hesitation. But the reality is more complex. Abusers are skilled at hiding their crimes, victims are often too young to articulate what's happening, and society is still learning how to balance intervention with privacy, how to protect children without destroying families, unnecessarily. What do you think could have prevented this tragedy? Should Jennifer Caldwell have faced criminal charges? Was Rachel Mosley's sentence just? Leave your theories and thoughts in the comments below. If cases like this fascinate and horrify you in equal measure, subscribe to Fear Sermon for more deep dives into history's darkest chapters. Ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. These stories matter. Not because they're sensational, but because understanding how abuse happens is the first step toward preventing it. See you in the next video. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never assume everything is fine behind closed doors. Because sometimes, the truth is far more terrifying than any nightmare.